All right, so I'd like to welcome everybody to another session of our Coffee and Conversations. I'm Amanda Salmon. I'm the manager of Museum and Holocaust Education, and I'm really excited to welcome here with us today Annie Bragdon and Rebecca Arabach. So they are two of our student educators. This past year, we launched a Student Educator Internship program. Obviously, with the way that COVID-19 has affected it, we didn't get to finish it quite exactly how we wanted to, but we were really happy to have Rebecca and Annie with us, and they kind of took their internship to the next level, which they will talk more about. If you have questions throughout, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be happy to ask them questions throughout or at the end. But for right now, I'm going to ask each of you, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are. Are you Portland born and raised? What do you like to do? Yeah.
I'm Annie. I am now a senior at St. Mary's, and I am born and raised in Portland. I enjoy reading, and I do like floral arrangements and like pretty much anything with flowers, and am trying to be a gardener. It is not working super well, but some of the plants are doing okay. And I don't know, so that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
I'm Rebecca. I'm also a senior at St. Mary's. I've been living in Portland for about 10 years. Before that, I lived in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm a dancer. I dance at Northwest Dance Project, which is a local sort of contemporary dance company. And so I do contemporary dance and ballet there. And I also enjoy art, especially drawing and collage. So yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. All right. So obviously this was our first year with this internship. So I didn't know who was going to apply. I kind of put it out there to different outlets and things like that. So why did you apply? What interested you about this internship?
So I think some of this will be true for Rebecca too. I think we both came to the museum on a field trip with our theology class sophomore year. And so that's at least how I became interested in the museum as a whole. And the reason I applied was mostly because I knew that there was a lot of history of in the world, but also in Oregon, that isn't taught in schools. And so I wanted to kind of learn that because I knew it was important. And so I thought that this would be a good opportunity and just become more involved in education and being an advocate. But to do that, you have to actually know what you're advocating for. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to educate myself and then use that to educate other people.
Yeah, so like Annie said, I also kind of found out about the museum through a field trip with St. Mary's. And I was also really interested in first learning about some of the history surrounding Oregon and Portland that I didn't know as much about, as well as sort of global history. And my family also has a lot of Jewish heritage, even though my parents aren't practicing Jews. Both of them, well, my dad is 3/4 Jewish and my mom is half Jewish. So I kind of saw this as an opportunity to connect with my Jewish heritage as well.
So I know for people who don't know, you went through a 12-hour training during the summer where you came to the museum. We went through some of the training that we do with our adult docents and then some different trainings for you. Is there anything during that training? So a lot of this was kind of geared towards personal interest and education. And I can tell you, I remember your field trip when you came with your class. I love students from St. Mary's because you always have such wonderful questions. Is there anything from the training that really surprised you, that kind of sat with you, that you kind of continue to think about today? You're like, Amanda, this was not a question you prepared for us. This is off the cuff. Yes, it is.
Well, one thing that sort of stuck with me is with the museum, I mean, we have the sections, which are mostly revolving around Oregon's history and then the Holocaust. But one thing we talked about in our training was other genocides and the history of genocide overall, not just related to the Holocaust, which sort of stuck with me because I think even though the Holocaust was a major genocide and is so important to study, there's so many other histories that are similar that are important to focus on as well.
I think I agree with that, and that was also like, there were so many that I didn't know about, and also like learning about how America has been involved in some of them was disturbing, but something that I hadn't really learned about before. And I also think something that just as an overall theme was like how much unlearning there is to do of things that either I had been taught that were not true, or just like, or things that I had never been taught. So I think I didn't realize how much I didn't know before, because people had either taught me something as if they had covered the whole, like all of discrimination and all of time, which is not possible to like teach that when in like 1 year. But I think there was just so much I didn't know about or thought I knew that was just not true. So that was interesting to find out.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, because I think unlearning is something as America we're kind of really grappling with at the moment. So what are things that you are on the process of unlearning, or things that you still have questions about? Because one of my favorite books is Lies My Teacher Told Me. Because as teachers and in school, we try to fit so much information into a short period of time. So things obviously end up getting cut out. This story is shaped. So what have you found that you've needed to unlearn, or those questions?
I think like this isn't from the training, but I still think it's relevant. Is like unlearning, or the idea that the past is like still like only the past, and that it doesn't still, like what I'm thinking about is Southern rights, and how I think a lot of the time, at least I was taught, segregation is not something that was like very recent, but it is. And even if it's not, like just the parts of the past definitely still persist into the present, and how much the past influences the present. And then I had another thing and I don't remember, so I might jump back in after.
No, that's absolutely, please do. And I actually think I'm going to steal something from you. Usually I talk about how the past influences the present, but I like how you said how the past persists in the present. So it's not saying that the past has ended, but it's still a continuation. So thank you for that. I think that's really, really insightful, and not something I've ever really thought about how to put into words before. So I will quote you from now on when I'm talking to people. You've made it.
I remembered, so
Okay.
but it's a very quick thing. So just the idea that Oregon and Portland are super progressive and don't really have problems is something that I think as a city we kind of project that image of ourselves, and because I mean it's easier and it's more comfortable, but it's definitely not true. And especially if you look at Oregon's past, the like racism was so like overt and clear, but a lot of the time we don't learn about that. So just kind of incorporating, like understanding that we are not as like perfect, I guess, as we think we are, and just, which doesn't mean that we can't get there, but just remembering that that's not the case.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is I think something that I've been unlearning or am in the process of unlearning is just how we think of Oregon. And I think not just in Portland and Oregon, but since people in Portland tend to lean Democrat and see ourselves as very liberal, I think we think that's enough. And I'm kind of unlearning that just because you have these ideas doesn't make you this perfect person, and you can still help to persist sort of ongoing problems in society, even if you don't agree with the ideas or things that are being persisted. So the idea that it's not just enough to disagree, but that you actually have to sort of stand up and do something.
Yeah, I was having this conversation. I follow this this account, Teach and Transform, on Instagram. She's an anti-racist, anti-biased educator. And just Rebecca, it reminds me of what she had posted 2 weeks ago. And it was, how are you intellectualizing racism? And kind of what you were saying, it's not enough to just think about it. It's not enough to just learn about it. It's how do you take that knowledge and turn it into action? And that's something that I think we all struggle with, not only as teachers and as students, but just as human beings in general. Are there any questions? Because I know on our tours, and you've given a tour, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes, but I always end introductions to tours with, I hope you leave with more questions than answers. So kind of after going through the trainings and talking to people, and we'll talk a little bit about your experience engaging with our visitors, but are there any questions that are still sitting with you that you don't have the answers to?
This isn't a question that I thought of, but I think it's one that you have said before that I just am still thinking about, which is, what do we do with the histories we inherit? That, I think that was one that you said, or maybe, but I'm not positive. But I just think it's something that I'm still thinking about, and probably will keep thinking about forever, because I will still have the histories I've inherited with me forever. So what am I doing to constantly dismantle, I guess, the things that my ancestors may have put up that are not, I don't know. I just think it's something I still don't have an answer, which is why this doesn't make a ton of sense, but because I'm still thinking about it a lot. So yeah, but that was my main question.
Yeah, that's a really major question that I'm not sure we'll ever fully be able to answer, but it's a good one. I think also just what do we do with the information we have, and how do we take action? Because it's a question that can be answered, but even if you answer it in one moment, I think it keeps being asked.
I love that you bring that up, and just because it is answered in one moment doesn't mean it's applicable to the next moment, or that it can't shift or change to the next moment. So you have to keep asking that question, even if it's the same question. Awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your experience with the visitors. So after you went through your 12-hour training, you had the opportunity to be an Ask Me docent in our core exhibitions. So for people who don't know, what that means is you greeted visitors when they came into the core exhibitions, you asked them if they had questions, you engaged in conversation, filled the gaps, led them around. So are there any highlights from the times that you were an Ask Me docent? Kind of tell us what that experience was like for you.
I think one of my favorite moments, which this isn't just a specific one, but a greater theme, is when kids came into the museum, and because I think that they were always so curious and eager to learn, and especially in the Oregon Jewish Stories exhibit, where you could walk them through it and show them the Girl Scout uniform and have them ask questions about that, and just help them move around it. And I don't know, I just thought that it was really great to see young kids that want to learn and want to understand different things. And so I think the Girl Scout uniform was definitely a favorite of the kids that I talked to. And then, but even some of the other things, they the roller skates, or maybe they went to the camp that we have the Frisbee from, or something like that. And so being able to connect with them on that level. And then I also really enjoyed enjoyed the tour we gave with our class, but I think we'll touch on that later.
Oh, we are coming to that next.
Yeah, I think it's so fun when kids come in and just to say to them like, hey, you can open these drawers. And then they'll just walk around and like look at all the little things. But I also have a favorite moment, which is that one day when I was just being an Ask Me docent, kind of doing my thing, a father and son came in and they just asked me to give them a tour. And so it was kind of like super impromptu. I wasn't prepared at all, but I kind of just got to walk around with them and just sort of give them my insights into parts of the museum. And I thought that was really cool because as an Ask Me docent, it's like the best thing when somebody comes in and they really want to hear what you have to say. So that was really fun and they were really engaged. So yeah.
So on the flip side of that, I know when I give tours, I'm always amazed by how much I learn from the people I'm giving the tours to. So yes, I absolutely love it when people come and ask me questions and I'm like, I can give you the answers, I can lead you. But are there any times when you talk to visitors that you're like, wow, thank you, because I didn't know that before and now I know something more? So
I have one, which is that one time I was in a museum and somebody came in and they were doing research on these synagogues that were established during the Oregon Trail period. And they had like traveled all around Oregon, finding out different information about these synagogues. And that was really cool because like I had never heard anything about that. And they just had this brand new information that was like this very specific part of history, but so relevant and so interesting.
very cool.
This isn't like a piece of information, but it's just like something that I thought was interesting once when I was there. So in the museum, there is a section that has like a bunch of photos, and one of the photos is I think of like a swimming class or like someone giving swim lessons. There's a pool. That's the main information there. But one of the people in the museum was like, wait, I used to take swimming lessons from her, or like, and like that they hadn't seen that picture before. And I just thought it was really great to then hear her like talking to the friends that she was with in the museum about like her experiences taking like with that teacher, which the experiences seemed positive, which is good. But I just thought that it was really great to like hear those connections.
I think that's one of the major benefits about being in a very local, culturally specific museum is that when people do come in and they see pictures or artifacts or something like that have some personal connection to them, it's always nice to see how they share that with other people. I know that's happened to me before in the museum, where people are like, that's me in the picture, and that's my brother, and that's my brother's wife, and you're like, this is you. I don't need to teach you. You're here to teach me. So that I'm really happy that you were able to get that experience. So halfway through, kind of in December, November, all of our student educators had the option to learn how to lead a tour of their own. So rather than just being an Ask Me, they came in on a Sunday for a training. We walked through the exhibitions, gave them our tour guide, and we practiced how to give a tour. And so Annie and Rebecca led a tour for their peers. So their class from St. Mary's came in. They came and met with me beforehand. We worked on how to make the tour very specific to their class's goals, and then they led it. So kind of tell us a little bit more about what that was like for you. What were the highs of leading that tour? Because I know as a manager for me, I was so proud of the work that you did. I was there watching the conversations, and they were such rich conversations. And you now know that tours go by very quickly, and you're like, no, I don't want this to end. And I know that your peers, just by the looks and questions that they had, didn't want the tour to end either. So tell us how that was for you.
Well, you kind of touched on one part of it that was really great for me, but we were in a social justice class, and it was really nice to be able to know exactly what we were learning in the class and be able to tailor something that we sort of know about in the museum and have our own personal knowledge of, and be able to sort of apply that to the class and teach our classmates about something that we know what knowledge they have and what we sort of like want them to get from it. So that was really cool.
I think for me, one of the highlights was just being able to like have discussions about things that we don't always get to talk about at school, or there isn't always like space dedicated to talking about them. So I think for the tour, it was focused on like legislation and discrimination in legislation. And so I know that I haven't had many classes that let us talk about that for an hour, and how like legislation in the past or from the Holocaust, how that is mirrored in legislation in the United States from the past and now. And so I thought that it was really great to just be able to talk about that, and because we don't always get the opportunity to do that. And so I also like the freedom of like, we did have things that we wanted to talk about, but we didn't get through all of them because people were so engaged in having a conversation. But that wasn't a bad thing. It was so much better because it showed like how much people wanted to talk about it, and how many questions people had. And so I thought it was really great, even though we didn't get through everything, like the depth of the conversations that we did have, and just to see the curiosity everyone had.
And I think you touch on a really good point there as an educator. And one of the things that I think is really important for people who are interested in learning more about how to be an educator is that you spark that curiosity within somebody. And sometimes as a teacher, you have all of these plans and you say, okay, first 15 minutes will go like this, then the next 10, and then conclusion. And as I was watching you in the Holocaust exhibition, where I put up my hand for 2 minutes left and you're like, we're still at the first part. We didn't get through anything. And sometimes that's beautiful. Sometimes you don't need to get to the end because you've turned people into wanting to learn for themselves. And so what were the conversations like when you went back to the classroom? Did you have any time to extend off of the tour? Because I know your group did get cut off in certain areas. Anything for there?
I wasn't actually in that class, so I wasn't there for any of the follow-up conversations, so I'll let Rebecca take this one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the main thing is not necessarily sort of like direct references to what we were talking about, but sort of how we shaped our conversations. Is that a lot of our goal was to draw these connections between sort of different points of history. And so I think once we got back into the classroom, that was even easier because we had sort of practiced doing it almost. So we had like opened up all these connections that people could make, and then they could make even more once we were back in the classroom studying other things.
Awesome. All right, so I know we're kind of running up on time, so I have one more question for you. So you've completed, again, I know our year kind of got cut short, whatnot, but now that this year of the internship has kind of concluded, what skills do you feel like you've gained, and how are you going to use those skills moving forward?
One skill I've gained is definitely just an ability to have conversations, especially difficult conversations that aren't about sort of easy subjects, and not just having those conversations, but sort of helping other people have those conversations and working on knowing the language to use in those conversations. It's still a process, but I think it's something that I've gotten a lot better at, and that will be really helpful moving forward.
Awesome.
My Wi-Fi is being a bit iffy, so I don't know if you can hear me.
We
or
can.
if I'm interrupting, so I
You're
apologize
good.
if I am. But one of the skills that I think I'll be taking with me is like how to think critically about the information I learn and like whose perspective it's from, who it's for, and like and just understanding more about what I'm learning so that I am really being careful that I'm like really understanding the truth or like all perspectives, so I'm not just like taking everything as if it is fact and just being more open to asking questions about what I've learned.
Wow. Thank you. I feel like if those are two answers I could have wished for, that was perfect. So we do have some questions. The first one is, do you think what you learned from your experience at OJMCHE informed the way that you are understanding the current protest movement?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of parts of history are coming to light that people are like highlighting and really wanting to focus on. And some of those things, especially related to Portland and Oregon, I'm like, oh yeah, I know that. Like, I've learned all this stuff about that. And that feels really good to sort of have some of that educational base. But then also, I think we've just learned a lot about how to think about things and think about who's being affected, how they're being affected. And I think those are really important things to look at right now.
I 100% agree with that. And then I also think like one thing that I've really been valuing right now is the different tools of resistance, because I am high risk for COVID, so I can't go protest right now. But knowing like there are so many other things that you can do. And so I think that that's something that's really shaped how like I'm acting right now. And because usually what I would do is not entirely, but focus a lot on protest. And that's something that I can't do right now. So just knowing that there are other options.
That's great. That's really, really great to hear, that our tools of resistance have kind of given you alternative ways to think about how to get involved when your main course of action is not available at the moment. Second question, is there anything that you want future student interns to know?
I think one thing is just like, it's okay if you don't know everything already. And it's because there's always going to be so much to learn. And then if you realize like, oh, I don't know something, then that's an opportunity to learn and maybe learn more. And so I think just like not being super worried that you won't have all the answers to a question someone might ask, because I've been asked questions and I have thought like, oh, I don't know that. But then we kind of figure it out together, and then it can become like another way to connect with people in the museum.
I think that's not only things that other students should know, Andy. I think every person needs that. I think adults need that sometimes more than students, that you don't have to know everything. So I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Rebecca, anything you want future student interns to know?
I mean, that's a really good one. It's kind of hard to follow, but I think kind of going off of that, just sort of embracing all the moments, because I think there are moments that are harder, or like no one's at the museum and you're kind of just like, well, here I am. But then there's just these moments that are like, this is what I've been working for, and like, this is why I'm doing this. And so to know that there'll be harder moments or more boring moments, but then there'll also be these like really amazing moments that feel so good. And so not to worry too much about the things that are happening in the moment, but to know that there will always be good things.
Awesome. All right, so we have another question. It is, did you get any comments from visitors that surprised you, like someone who didn't agree with the way that the exhibition approached themes of equity and justice? So I know I've had people come up to me on tours with this before that has been a little more questioning or confrontational, or some some student would say something and I'd be like, whoa, I don't know how to answer that yet, or I don't know. So did that happen to you at all on any of the tours, or?
I can't think of any instances I had with that, but I'm sure I have, but I can't think of any, or at least none that were so shocking that I like can't stop thinking about them, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't really think of any either. I think people have mostly been pretty positive towards me.
I mean, you two are just two very nice people. Who would want to be mean to you? All right. Are there any other questions that people would like to submit? I'll wait another, 30 seconds or so in case people are typing. But Annie or Rebecca, is there anything else that you want people to know kind of as we conclude, either about you, the internship? Oh, I actually have one more question. And this is a question that I asked you in your interview, is how, like, oh no, how does this experience fit into your broader goals? I think Annie froze, so it's on you at the moment.
Okay. Well, I think for me, I don't exactly know how I answered the question in my interview, but I think being at the Oregon Jewish Museum has really shaped my goals. I think I've become a lot more aware of the importance of history, and I've kind of grown this interest in sort of politics and like the world, I guess. And so I feel like going forward, I think in my education, I'll focus a lot more on those things. Like, we're seniors, so we're going to go to college pretty soon. And I think when I do go to college, I'm going to want to study history a lot more and study politics and things that I've really learned from being at the museum.
Awesome. And I don't know if you heard me, Annie, before. Okay, so
I did not.
All right, so my question was, and I had asked this to all of you during your interviews, was how does this internship fit into your larger goal? So you said that you had wanted to be a gardener, so I'm interested in how this internship fits into your broader goals of being a gardener. I mean, it's a question that I was asked when I had applied for a job for being like a sales rep somewhere at like some clothing store, and I was like, genocide and selling clothing, how are these related? So I'm interested if it was just out of pure interest to you, or how it's going to help you frame kind of your bigger understanding moving forward.
I think it's kind of both, because I am very interested in history, but I also think, and in general, like what I'm going to do with my life, I'm not quite sure. So like goals that way, I'm not quite sure, because I'll have to see what I end up doing. But I think just being more involved in like education and social justice I think that this is helping me do that, and is definitely helping that goal. And also has like piqued my interest to things that I didn't know, like just how much I was interested in them. I knew I was, but not to the extent that I didn't know how like interested I was. And I don't know, I don't know exactly how this ties in to being a gardener quite yet, except that like maybe when you have more information, then you get to grow more, and then you can kind of change. And I think that that's really special.
You know what? I love that. I love that. And I'll tell you, so my answer that I had for selling clothing and the Holocaust was like, people become, or one reason that people can become perpetrators is because they're not necessarily happy with themselves. So if they're happy with the way that they're feeling and they're happy with the way that they're looking, then they're more open to self-growth and having conversations and helping others. So I think I like the whole growth aspect of, nurturing plants and nurturing people. That's really great. All right, well, I want to thank you both so much for your time, congratulate you on completing the year with us. I know I really enjoyed seeing you both grow and take on every opportunity. And when we reopen, I know the both of you expressed interest in continuing on next year. So when we reopen and we can have you back, we very, very much look forward to welcoming you. But thank you. Have a great, great rest of your week and weekend. And we'll be in touch, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.